Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining today's seminar. Our focus is on development policy and resilience in Ethiopia. So a theme that feels especially urgent as our country faces both challenges and opportunities. And development is not just economic growth, but about people, communities, and how well we can adapt industry when crisis hits, whether it's droughts, conflicts, or global shock like pandemics. So when you talk about resilience, it's not abstract. It's the farmer in Oromia finding a way to cope up with unpredictable rains, and also in Addis, it's the mother of Addis and navigating rising food of prices, inflations. So it's local communities that adapt and innovate and hold each other up when systems are strained. So policy can either strengthen those coping capacity or leave people more vulnerable. That's why today's discussion matters deeply. So we are very fortunate to have with us two distinguished voices who bring both expertise and heart to the subject. First, Dr. Reta, with over 2 decades of work bridging research and real-world community resilience, partnering with global organizations like UNICEF, UNDP, and everything, but always keep people at the center. And Mr. Dereje Getu, our CEO of WDRT PLC, whose experience in economic policies and program and evaluation about translating knowledge into strategies that touch lives on the ground, who is also data scientist, over 50-year experience in research and data analytics. So I'm very excited for the insights they will share with us. Without further delay, let's invite our speaker, Dr. Reta, to begin with the question that I want to pose with. Looking back across the past century, how would you describe the evolution of Ethiopia development policies? And in your view, what are the key lessons from the journeys that have shaped the country resilience today? Please go ahead, Dr. Reta.
Thank you very much, Da, for inviting me to this very important discussion. And of course, hot discussion. And Jalene, thank you very much also for inviting me to respond to your question first. I think for the sake of this discussion, it's important to briefly explain why and what do we mean, by development policy and resilience. To begin with, development policy is mainly created intentionally to guide the nation's economic and social progress. Its core purpose is to improve, the well-being of the citizens, to improve economic conditions, infrastructures, health, and the like. Mainly, economic policy, the development policy focuses, mainly on poverty, inequality, and addressing, poverty, inequality, and instability. So we craft development policies, to mobilize resources more efficiently and prioritize investment in critical areas, so that building resilience against shock like climate change or economic crisis. So ultimately, development policy serves as blueprint for transform countries' potential to tangible, prosperity, equality, sustainability, and benefit all the segments of society, not just privileging a few. It means that protect the powerful, the exploitation of the powerful from the being exploited by the the powerless. So at the center of a development policy, resilience is always a pillar. So let me just provide broadest idea of the past development policies, starting with, the imperial era. Of course, we have a development policy even earlier than that, but the concrete was starting from that time. Briefly looking at it now, this period that's the period between 1950 and 1974. It's a period of, lots of ambition, this top-down modernization of community and the state building. However, during this time, the development policy fundamentally contradicts. Yeah, it successfully built a resilience and centralized state apparatus with a modern infrastructure, and strong international support and centralized administration. However, it systematically undermines the resilience of its people. Just to cite an example, for example, it perpetuates an exploitation of, the poor people through the land tenure policies, which actually face opposition from the later, and focusing on export over food security, complete ignoring of smallholder farmers at that time, and concentrating wealth and opportunities to the few elites, at expense of the majorities, and then suppressing political and economic as well as social greatness at that time. And this regime with the 1975 famine, which actually committed the life of many people, and then ultimately leads to the regime change. When you look the imperial, the follow-up, regime, the socialist regime, philosophically they follow, the radical Marxist-Leninist approach, centralized almost all driver of development at the hand of the state, and the notable policies like land nationalization, which is most impactful. It is, ending feudalism at that time. It looks like, as initially reduce the inequality regarding land holding, but the land holding changed from landlord to the state. And it's also focused like collectivization, villagization, adopting the Soviet style like kolkhoz approach, and this leads to strict, price control, nationalization of all industries. Ultimately, this leads to vulnerability because agricultural productivity starts diminishing. There was a brutal civil war. The economic collapse was there, and major famine between 1983 and 85, which committed the life of nearly 1 million people, and the resilience was actually sacrificed for ideological purity of the state at that time. And post 1991, the philosophy of ethnic federalism and the market lead approach actually is a mix of this. It's not very clear in this regard. So economically, it's initiating a market-oriented approach, but with the dominant in the party control, state control. One of the notable policies at that time was agricultural development and industrialization. This has actually focused on the boosting smallholder farmers, productivity growth was there, massive investment in infrastructure, dam, watershed development, hydropower development, road network, housing, industrial parks, and the like. This allowed also private sector investments, at that time. Later, strong focus on, like social sector, health, where, thousands of health extension workers, development agents for agriculture was trained, and the investment in education was huge. This leads to, dramatic key human development indicators. In terms of human development indicators, increase issues regarding, the progress in key human development indicators. Between 1991 and present, one is the Human Development Index, according to United Nations Development Program. It increased by 75% from merely 0.285 to about 0.5, around that. Life expectancy increased actually from 44 years to about 65 years. And under 5, child mortality per thousand also tremendously reduced by about 80%. Mortality, particularly maternal mortality, has reduced due to the huge investments in health areas, and this reduced the maternal mortality from nearly 1,215 per 10,000 days to about 267. So this is a magnificent change, and gross enrollment rates actually increased by about 167%. Between this period, I mean, when I talk the framework, I'm talking between 1991 and 2005. Literacy rate, including adult literacy population, also actually improved by about 57%. So how we translate this to, resilience? So when we look at the economic resilience, there is impressive microeconomic growth and poverty reduction for over, nearly about 4 decades. However, there is a challenge, like state-led investment, create a huge debt, and focuses on high input agriculture and creating, ecological pressure, focusing on, high input agriculture means floriculture and others is created, ecological pressure. Yeah. And the other thing is the political system actually, the ethnic patronage and ultimately leads to conflicts, and the coupled with recent civil war and drought have severely tested the resilience of the economy. So the key lessons is that land tenure was fundamental in this regard. When we see from the land tenure arrangement during the emperor to the Derg. The other thing is state resilience doesn't mean a community resilience. Sometimes the state may be strong, but the community may be fragile. So it means that increasing GDP growth alone, doesn't secure community resilience. The other thing is the issue of sustainable resilience cannot be built without foundation of political and economic resilience, which needs inclusive approach. And overall, I think it requires sustainable, development policy, which is a part of resilience, require a long-term, engagement and integrating environmental sustainability into all walk of economic, ecological, as well as political stabilities. Thank you very much, and sorry for eating much of your time, Dereje. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Reta. Dari, if there is anything else you can add up?
All right, thank you so much, Jalani, for moderating this session. And it's difficult to piggyback Dr. Reta, but I would like to say a few things in a couple of minutes. In general, Ethiopia's development journey over the past century is actually a story of profound transformation. Like, the late imperial, the start of modernization, but with a centralized governance, and then followed by the Derg that completely controls everything and significantly affects the resilience of the community. And then, of course, post 1991, the developmental state ideology, who is on Dr. Reta, would you mind muting yourself, please? Thank you. So, and then the post 1991 developmental states as well, it tried to anchor agriculture as a first growth, and then coupled by the large public investment. And then, of course, we are here in post 2018, where learning from the EPRDF, the government tried toward market liberalization and then ignite the private sector engine. So this journey highlights both a really an amazing, impressive growth and also a constant struggle to build resilience against various shocks, be it conflict, drought, flood, and etc. And of course, macroeconomic instabilities. So each phase of this development journey left distinct legacies for resilience, be it household or the institutions. When we say resilience, the household or the institution's capacity to absorb or adapt or recover from shocks that happened in a scenario, in a situation. So it's very important to reflect, like over within the last 60 years only, we have had around 10 development policies that were enacted by the different regions. So the imperial regime has 3 5-year perspective plans, and the Derg also tries to enact 3 policy plans, including the land tenure. While the Derg was on its base, they have learned their or acknowledged the policy failure and try to introduce the mixed economy. And then further, post 1991, the PRDF regime tried to focus on agriculture and the smallholder by introducing the agriculture lead development industrialization with an understanding or an objective of the growth of the agriculture will feed or will trigger industrial or manufacturing development. That was the assumption. And of course, after that, after the Adli, the famous Adli, we have got like this a policy, the first in its kind or in Ethiopian history, the poverty reduction policy framework was enacted in 2002 with the sustainable poverty reduction, and then it was for a brief period, actually, from 2003 to 2005. In fact, even though it is a poverty reduction strategy that was built on the Millennium Development Goals, initially it doesn't have even the food security as it is a main pillar. And then PASDEP comes 2005, 2010, and then the Growth and Transformation Plans 1 and 2. These are all poverty reduction projects. Of course, Ethiopia has shown a significant shift since 2003. I think the eve of the 1997 election has shown us there was a significant shift in the Ethiopian development trajectory, and then we have seen an impressive growth over 10 years, pretty much double-digit economic growth. Of course, there are a number of factors for that, and all these growths helped in significantly reducing maternal mortality, in increasing education, including life expectancy. Actually, over 10 years, our life expectancy increases by 12 years from 55 to 67. So these policies in general, and of course, here we are with the homegrown economy after 2018 or since 2019, with a 10 years perspective plan, as well coupled with the nationally determined commitment plan that built on the climate resilient green economy. In all these policies, they have fortified resilience and also and somehow significantly regressed resilience. The recent, since COVID, it somehow affects our resilience, definitely, and then the continued conflicts since 2020 in Tigray, Amhara, and Oromia is really are playing significant role in affecting the hard-won development gains over the last two decades. So yes, our development policies, they positively affect somehow our resilience and also play adverse. Back to you, John. Thank you.
Thank you, Dereje. I would like to pose some question for you for the second question. How have this policy, particularly in recent decades, helped or hindered resilience and vulnerable and conflict-affected communities? You have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ja. Definitely, as I mentioned earlier, actually, development policies, they have a potential to fortify or undermine resilience in general, our capacity to endure shocks, be it, as I said, droughts, conflict, or economic instabilities. Over the last 30 years, since you are asking me in the recent policies, we have seen a tremendous change since 2004. The Ethiopian economy grows successively, double digit from 2005 to 2010, around 11%, and then from 2010 to 2015, around 10.2%, and of course after that it starts to decline around 8%, and then further declines post 2019 to 5%, 3%. This is an amazing growth. Back in the days, post 1991 until 2002, it was around 3.9%. Before that, pretty much it was volatile and stagnant. So policies can hinder or help resilience if they're proper, or depending on whether they're proper or not. I believe that the last 30, 40 years of our development policies, especially the developmental state ideology in general, is, on paper, it is a proper one. It manifests itself by agricultural development-led industrialization that focuses on smallholder agriculture. And then comes the first poverty reduction strategy paper, and then the PASDEP, and the GTP 1, 2, and now we're in the homegrown economy 1. So I believe they have built resilience. I can justify that with some statistics. For example, in 1999, almost 19% of, around before 2000 in general, before 2000, almost 90% of the Ethiopian population lives under $7 per day. And then that has actually significantly changed. By 2015, 90% of the population, of course, 10% of the population is now above that $6 threshold. Moreover, this is in terms of just the daily dollar index. Most importantly, in 2025, under PASDEP, the government shows it is a proper one by inaugurating the famous Productive Safety Net program. That Productive Safety Net program helps to predictably smooth consumption and help to curb famine and drought during a difficult periods for Ethiopia. And through that process as well, the government, put a huge public investment in building roads and other infrastructures that significantly improves the human capital, like the health and education. So through in the last periods, in those periods, For example, the government invests 4% of its GDP to education, 1% to health, and this actually, as I mentioned earlier, increase our life expectancy and also help us to reduce the poverty headcount from 55% in 2000 to 31 in 2005. Of course, now that headcount has increased due to the macroeconomic instability and conflict and displacement, but the past policies has helped to build our resilience, and then recent shocks actually also affect or undermine our community's resilience. But in general, we were fortunate enough to see infant mortality rate to decline by 100, even more 100%, more than 100%. It was 73% around 2000. I mean, 73 out of 1,000 kids. But now, around 2015, it was around 35. And of course, we can take the last 4 or 5 years as niche years because of the conflict and displacement. You know, that over 21.5 million people are still in need of development assistance. So we can expect the headcount can rise significantly from 31 to 40% ish. So, but in general, what we can say, as long as the development policies are pro-poor and the government investments or any policy changes maintain the real gain or the real income of the households, it can build resilience. Otherwise, we might see growth. That growth only benefit the elites and the few, and then leave behind a significant majority to live in under poverty. So I can sum up with this word, Ja. Thank you. Back to you.
That was very insightful. Thank you, Dereje. That takes us to the present and how well policy today are equipped to handle shocks. So, Dr. Reta, let me turn to you. Can you please share your perspective on this, please?
Thank you, Jaren. And let me say something about, regarding the Ethiopian policy journey. We say that, development policy relate to resilience. It looks like pragmatic, inclusive, and sometimes locally, ground level rooted, with all its, limitations. However, we must always, notice that government can set up policy, but resilience is not something, that government builds for its people. It's what emerges when people have the security, people have the resource, people have a freedom, and that they build, resilience for themselves. Having said this, let me talk about regarding the current, zooming into the current development policies. In my observation, there is a kind of dual legacies in terms of resilience. On one hand, the policies helped community to be, resilient through significant, public investments, which creates strong foundation, for community to withstand shocks. On the other hand, the same policy often, hinders resilience. It's sometimes top down, it's top down policy design. Sometimes it's maybe good policy, sometimes maybe bad policy. So sometimes, when we, have a good policy and implement in a good way, that's successful. When we have a good policy, but the implementation is poor or bad, still there is a failure, but it's something to learn from. The worst thing is when you have a bad policy and a bad implementation, there will be, a compounded problem, a compounded policy failure, as well as resilience failure. So, the top down is actually a challenge in this regard, because when this policies are top down, it increases the vulnerability of the community because inequitability will be perpetuating. The priority of this community is not known. For example, if the priority needs to be for smallholders to increase their production and productivity, because majority of Ethiopian population are smallholder in agrarian population, but the focus is on the local commercial agriculture, that will be mismatch and leads to a problem. Sometimes even a policy, for example, say large-scale commercial agriculture and investment has displaced millions of people from their homeland, what's referred to as land grabbing. This also undermined, land rights of the pastoralists and their livelihood. Consequently, this fuels, conflict, threatening national instability and jeopardize, the development gains, derived from the previous development efforts. So I think, in conclusion, when we look at the current, statistics, say in 2004, for example, the level of poverty, particularly the multidimensional poverty of this population, Ethiopian population, is really striking. Nearly 80% of the rural population are considered poor. This suggests that the current policy needs to be more pro-poor. And this overlap with drought, flood, conflict, the past COVID-19 pandemic, and highly spiking price, when it's actually inflations made difficult for the people to live. And also, it's very challenging to reduce poverty, leading to failing livelihood living standards. Just to give you an example and finish my discussion on this, absolute poverty rates has increased recently from merely 3.5 in 2015 to 2016 to 33%, in 2021, 2022, according to the Ethiopia Economic report in 2024, with a huge, regional disparities. So, generally, the issue of resilience is not something that only expected only from the government, but it's also something that we expect for the community, from the community, at community level. At the same time, at the economic level, at macroeconomic level, given the current homegrown economic reforms, the devaluation and the like, and with galloping inflation, the things are really becoming difficult for the poor people, to afford living. So this increases the vulnerability of people instead of increasing resilience. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Reta. That was a nice reflection. I know you touched a lot of topics and development policies, how to prepare that. But I want you to share your opinion how well Ethiopia's current development policy prepares to address ongoing and emerging shock like economic or environmental or social things. You have 2 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jelani. Again, let me focus on the current development policy. I said earlier, the current development policy also exhibits significant strengths in intention and also design. But I can say that, in my opinion, it faces critical weaknesses in implementing, like inclusivity, addressing the root cause of economic problem. So this leaving the nations, at the verge of vulnerability. Let me look at from different angles. Economically, it's a lot of focus on massive infrastructure development. This is actually helpful because it diversifies the economy. It's beyond agriculture. However, the weakness, like high public debt, which affects the physical space of the country, and economy remain actually vulnerable to the global commodity price fluctuations. You can take, for example, the price of fuel and imported commodities, including food, and with high domestic inflation, this erodes the resilience of the poor, economic resilience of the poor. Environmentally, the key strength is the Ambition, the Green Legacy Initiative, which actually planted billions of trees. It's helpful in addressing long-term land degradation and climate mitigations. However, this policy remained heavily focused on, long-term. Focusing on, high-value agriculture. Say, for example, mainly focusing, for example, wheat production. But in a food security system, people have different coping strategies to cope up with problems, and they have a very complex adaptive capacities, and these things are overlooked in this policy. As a result, the majority of smallholders have been facing persistent drought, flooding, with a growing population and slow economic change in economic structure, the problem of land scarcity, which are actually these days these things are going to be looks like a chronic. When we look at the social issue, social issues, and there's a critically issues regarding again, the top-down approach. Looks like the current policy, in my opinion, is a top-down, which exacerbates local graveness over land, over resource, and the like. And consequently, there is some kind of social cohesion looks like disattaching and affecting communities' resilience. Yeah, that's why millions of people are internally displaced, and the economic gain as well as environmental gain is now going to be jeopardized because of lack of alternative source of livelihood. I think I have to stop here and back to Jalen.
Thank you so much, Dr. Reta. Dereje, if you have anything to add, can proceed with the next question.
Thank you so much, Ja. I might have a couple of things actually to add on what Dr. Reta has mentioned in general about the existing or the current development policies in Ethiopia. So I believe Ethiopia has, the right architecture on paper at this point in time. That we have this 10-year perspective plan, and also that 10-year perspective plan has also supported by the nationally determined commitment implementation plan. It was built on, as I mentioned earlier, the climate resilient Greek economy policies of Ethiopia. It tries to scale everything and tries to see the nations to transform holistically trade, industry, agriculture, and even energy and waste. But of course, it really requires a huge investment. The government committed 20% out of the $350 billion investment required to build a resilient economy in general. Of course, as much as this perspective plan looks good on paper, the execution capacity is uneven. And that's why pretty much at the UC, in recent times, the rural sector is completely abandoned, we can say, and then development looks like the urban, the shiny projects. It's very unfortunate. As you all know, since 2009, we have gradually devaluing our currency and liberalizing it. But we didn't dare to index the cash transfer or the kind transfer that the cash transfer, that we give to the PSNP beneficiaries. What used to buy a sheep or a cow for a PSNP beneficiary to build resilience can't buy a chicken now. So I believe the current development policy neglects the rural mass. Of course, we have this aggressive intervention in increasing irrigation and focusing on certain crops, as Dr. Reta said, wheat, and even forcing rural farmers not to plant other crops. It's just like, to reach certain metrics of ton of wheat production on a year. But as I said, our farmers' coping mechanism is different. They know when they need to plant potato or maize in their farm. You can't dictate that and then ask them to plant wheat. That is really one of the limitations of these development policies. That, as I said, it is on paper, it looks good, but when we implement it, the story is completely different. So not only actually the rurals, as Dr. Reta has said, absolute poverty has significantly increased. The main reason why absolute poverty has significantly increased that our purchasing power, our income is still there, the same income that we used to earn, but inflation has been skyrocketed. From 2015 to 2018, the economy has been slowed down, but inflation has been skyrocketed. And then that inflation was not timed or curved. It keeps growing, and then the government further fueled it by devaluing the currency. So our income is stagnant, but the price of injera changes from 5 birr to now 30 birr. So now that definitely, this 500% change in price will drive us into an absolute poverty. So now poverty is not a story of the rural poor in Ethiopia at this point in time. It has actually predominantly become the story of the urbans as well. So the shocks, when we say the economic shocks prices, foreign currency, and growth, we haven't seen improvements. Of course, according to the Central Statistics Service, inflation has been reduced to at least below 20%, trusting the government statistics, of course. And then, as we know, foreign currency, the government said the allocation is better, but we have seen the parallel market premium was reached on $175. I mean, birrs per dollar, which is like around 35 birr difference from the official rate, which means still we don't have sufficient hard currency to distribute to our need. So, and then of course our growth is not really, it has been like 8.5, 7.5, 5.6, and something like that. Now I think it is rising into 7%. For Ethiopia to reach into the middle income, or at least the low middle income country, it has to grow successively, above 10%. And so I think much is needed to do in that figure. And the most importantly, of course, the environmental and the climate shocks, we understand the governments argue that they have planted around 40 billions of trees in the nation. So I think we have to talk about, like, okay, we have 40 billions, which means if we plant 40 billions of trees, that means now with just 10% of if successful, if 10% of the seedlings actually successfully grow, the country's forest coverage should have significantly changed. If I don't believe that is what manifested. So I think we should really focus as well, not on the count of the seedlings that we plant. Of course, we need to focus more on the survival. We should give as much focus as we can in our mobilization to the seedling towards as well the survival. That will, of course, significantly help us in being a climate resilient and build a resilient economy. And of course, the watersheds, it should be reflected by the water impact. It's most importantly, as we are actually, in our country is an important, as we speak now, we are in an important milestone. The country is going to inaugurate the Grand Renaissance Dam, which has multi-faceted impact, political, economic, and social impact on the nation, definitely. But sedimentation is going to be a big issue. So environmental conservation is going to be something that we really need to focus about. And then the social one, that conflict and shocks. At this point in time, infant mortality has significantly increased as a result of the conflict in the last 4 years, be it in Tigray, Amhara, and Oromia region, and in parts of South as well. So health infrastructure significantly deteriorated. Our labs are not stocked. Our pharmacies are empty, and we don't have as much, even those benevolent health extension workers that helped us a lot in gaining a significant change in human development, improvement of human development or human capital index, are not functioning well now, including the agricultural extension workers as well. So, and most importantly as well, gender-based violence has been skyrocketed as a result of the conflict. Conflict triggered gender-based violence. Irrespective of where it happens, it has been skyrocketed, be it in Tigray, Amhara, Oromia, and also there is a huge displacement triggered by food insecurity, triggered by conflict. These are big shocks that affect our resilience. So we expect the government to revise its perspective plans to be proper. The government is very ambitious, but I believe it really to get the long term, as Dr. Reta said, in order to get the long term economic growth, they are sacrificing the short term gain that I mean the short term development intervention. So I would say we have been in a very precarious situation that needs a government close attention in a way, whatever the interventions, the mega interventions that we do, to be really proper and focused to the majority of the majority of the people, not to the few and the elites. I mean, this has been the history over years, but I think this time it's even much worse. With that in mind, I think you are also asking me to respond to another question. What was the question?
Okay, it touched every topic, but I want to hear about a strategy that effectively align with short-term growth objectives with longer-term resilience and goals, especially in sectors like agriculture, trade, and safety nets. You have 2 minutes, please.
All right, thank you. So, as I mentioned earlier, Ethiopia's economic policy have historically oscillated between like ambitious growth targets and reactive measures. When the shock happened, everybody rise up to solve that one, be it agriculture, trade, or safety nets in general. So I think it needs a very delicate balance between the short-term gains and the long-term resilience that we want to build. So as we speak, we are facing an ongoing challenges from conflict, climate change, macroeconomic instability. It's making this balance is very critical for our sustainable livelihoods. What we expect in this 10-year development plan in general, I mean, the homegrown economic agenda, to focus on the purse, not to bypass by the mega development policy changes. Okay? It is important for the economy to be more open to the world and to get privatized and everything, and the currency to get liberalized. In return, what are we doing to maintain the hard-fought gains, both in terms of human capital, climate change, and every other gains? I mean, conflict deteriorates the environmental resilience that we built over 20 years. The foreign currency depreciation significantly affect the consumption smoothing that we are trying to build either through PSNP or other development interventions. The inflations as well, So I believe the government to focus, as I said again, to be proper, focus on climate smart agriculture, build on the human capital, and also diversified the economic basis that withstand shocks in general. So let's not forget, we are still agrarian. So open the economy, liberalize the financial markets, but make sure to index the transfers by, to smooth consumption, where those individuals that were left out of a poverty not to return to in poverty again. Also, when there are emergencies, I also believe make it our emergency responses rule-based, not ad hoc. Let's not just raise in mass and try to help when emergency happens. What if we make it rule-based? We can curb inflation if we make it rule-based. For example, we can release grain by predicting inflation and rainfall. If there's going to be rainfall shortage, well, let's release some metrics of wheat or maize or F. And for that matter, our grain reserve should also be cognizant of the country's crop diversification. It shouldn't be wheat only, it shouldn't be maize or F only. It should include everything. And also, we have built the PSNP comes with work, a public work is saying that has built roads, clinics, schools and everything. Are we maintaining them? That is also an important thing. So I believe we are moderately prepared. In general, to curb shocks, but we are in a very difficult situation where over 21 million people are needing human assistance. So the short-term and long-term thing, it requires a delicate balance. Again and again, I would say, in order to be resilient in the long term, we shouldn't ignore the short-term loss that we are making by pushing down a significant majority to under poverty or absolute poverty, as Dr. Reta has mentioned. So diversify your export, which is good, but also focus on what you import too, and make it proper in general. And then the most important thing, of course, all these things, whether it is, we can't get that, even the long-term resilience, unless we turn the country's peace and security situations completely in different direction. So probably I'll get a chance to explain or to reflect on that. Back to you, Jan.
Okay, that was very nice, insightful. So I'd like to pose some questions for Dr. Reta. What are the most urgent policy gaps to address today? And if you have to recommend one priority action for the next decade, what would it be? We have 5 minutes. Please continue, Dr.
Thank you very much. I hope you need to be generous this time in terms of time. Sorry, I think said enough. We have raised a lot of issues relate to the current policies. My overall assessment regarding the current policy gaps, actually the current when we talk about policy, by the way, we are talking about general development policy framework. The framework, we're talking about the framework. So, one of the critical gaps I have seen is that the inclusivity gap. When I mean the inclusivity gap, it's a fragility inclusion gaps. I'll explain it. Sometimes we have in this policy, or practically translate the policy into practice, resilience seems to be a PR issue. When I say a public relation issue, and not really a key focus. Yes, physical asset like infrastructure is very important. Increasing some economic metrics may be very important, but failing to address the root cause of this country, as Dereje said earlier, it's all about the political fragility, cleavage, and the like. This actually drives conflict, which repeatedly, as I've said, destroyed the development gains. This is one point I observed. The other thing is I found a critical gap in investing in agriculture. Yeah, agriculture is still the most important economic sector in this country. Without investing in a rural agrarian setting, you cannot increase productivity. It means that increasing the income of rural people. It means that increasing the price of food for urban people or for landless people, even living in rural areas. So ignoring this means, actually, ignoring resilience of the rural community. So they will be vulnerable to economic as well as ecological shocks. The third point in my assessment is a critical gap in shock responsive social protection approach. Yeah, we have said now Dereje have raised a lot of things regarding productive safety net program, which actually has been implemented for the last 2 decades. That's not adequately scaled or funded to automatically expand, during major shocks. But when the major shock comes, still people are not enduring. They are falling back, still slide back to where they were. So this leaving millions of people, still unprotected, particularly during the shock they need it most. So an effective targeting and productive safety nets, which is actually critical for climate resilience, because these people are carrying out different development activities, which increases community resilience. Yeah. And we should know that these people are the poorest of the poor and the most vulnerable household as well. And we need to be on the up-to-date data. I will elaborate later, but for now, the neediest should be known. We don't have data sometimes when we are, deciding or targeting the people for productive safety net, which expanding to even the urban areas. And we should not use this thing for a political purpose. That's my issue. The other critical gap I found is that is a lack of building transcending institution. Without resilient institution, we cannot build a resilient economy. We cannot build resilient social and ecological, economically and socially or ecologically resilient communities. That's going to be illusion. They may appear really, during the time of calm, but they vanish, at the first sign of the shock. So it's very important that to build institutions. This is actually a chronic problem in Ethiopia the last 60 years. The other thing is, working to resolve the macroeconomic instability, like promoting, diversifying sector and actually adding value to the commodities, so that avoiding over dependence on, external aid, external loan and the like. Actually, we need to prioritize our resources. You need to plan, realistically, so that reducing the debt burdens and creating macroeconomic instability. Again, that's inevitable, and what we should not forget that poverty reduction strategy is still important. The current policies, 10 years development policy said to reduce poverty from 19% to 7%. But as I said earlier, already the level of poverty increased to 33%. This is shocking, actually. Now, the one I postponed that talking about data, Ethiopia, the latest statistics, census we had it is 2007, and still we are carrying out our planning and navigating development planning and everything based on that old data, which actually it means that the kind of faded map. So government should focus, and when needed, try to make periodic census, which is fundamental and a prerequisite for any credible development resilience strategy. We cannot devise without that. So the absence of this, census this time means a significant factor for fragility. Lastly, I think the key priority is that the issue of inclusive national dialogue and reconciliation process. We need to ensure peace and security in the coming, at least if it is not just in a few years, in the coming decade, we should ensure peace and security. That leads to actually, when there is peace and security, it needs to, new approach to development, new political settlement, and new commitment. So why this is actually the priority? It's the foundation of for all development activities. We cannot carry out economic, environmental, and other things without ensuring peace and security. So ensuring peace and security means ensuring rule of law, strengthening social policies that can help us to achieve lasting resiliences. So we should avoid a cyclical nature of conflicts, and this is the most important thing we should focus right now. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Reta. That was a very thoughtful reflection. I like to give a chance for the Dereje for recommendation. Any recommendation you have, please proceed. You have 3 minutes.
All right. Thank you so much, Jalani. Of course, Ethiopia's development planning faces critical gaps in linking with resilience, hindering its ability to address shocks in general. So, given, I mean, I can put a lot of recommendations, Jalani. I will mention a couple of main specific recommendations later, but I just want to focus one important thing. Our challenges are enormous. Current challenge, probably the future challenges are going to be enormous. But by all means, first and foremost, the armed conflicts that is happening around the country is the biggest challenge or impediment to our development. It significantly affects the movement of labor. It significantly affects the movement of traded goods and even executing productive activities. Let's see, gold mining. Just because of the conflict, it has been stopping for a long period of time. And now, of course, they're resuming, be it in Wallaka or other places, even in Tigray. Due to just the conflict, I just want to give you a simple example. 15% of national food supply that comes from Oromia wasn't able to come even to the center. 15% supply from the big supplier region. It's just because of the conflict. Ethiopia's exports, textile exports, cement, and everything that was a pillar in Tigray are nowhere to found now. So in 2022, there was a study by, there was a growth diagnostic study that was made by the Harvard University Growth Lab. So the manufacturing sector, more than 70%, more than 50% of the manufacturing sectors in Ethiopia, they were performing below 50% of their capacities. Not only because of foreign currency shortage for imported inputs, but also due to the mobility restrictions of goods and people between regions and places as a result of the conflicts. And surprisingly, over 20% of the manufacturing sectors, they were performing with their 1/5 capacities. And recently, it is evident that some of the Chinese companies are actually moving to other East African countries, just looking for peace and security and rule of law. So I think that is very important. By any means, the government has to work on this, I believe. And of course, you can't attract domestic, let alone domestic, foreign direct, let alone foreign direct investment. You can't attract even domestic investment in such precarious conditions, in such difficult conditions. Yes, the government said that they have garnered around $4 billion or $5 billion of foreign direct investment. Let's be honest with that. Those investments are actually strongly backed by the government. So they have the security assurance and other things by the government. Recently, the biggest investor in Safaricom Ethiopia is the Japan conglomerate. They have got a big insurance, and one of that insurance that comes as a result of the changing policies, or that covers the changing policy as well as conflicts. Not everybody has that luxury. A private investor doesn't have that luxury of getting huge sum of insurance for conflict and policy changes and everything. So investors are interested to invest in your country, even your fellow citizens, only your policies are predictable. There is a rule of law, peace and security. If they could be able to sell their products without any problem from Addis to Mekelle or from Addis to Natal. That is very important and crucial. And another important thing that I think we want to highlight here as well, Ethiopia's population is growing and the youth is growing. Every year, 3 million people are added into the workforce. Are we in a situation, or are we resilient enough to absorb this new workforce? If we are not giving them an opportunity for this new workforce that added every year, whatever growth that we are anticipating in the future is not going to be materialized. So I think it is very important for the government to focus on this as well. And another, after peace and security, of course, what I would say is like macroeconomic stabilization is very important. We want our government to be physically and monetarily conservative. We know back in the days, even under the 10-year perspective plan, the government used to print money to finance local projects because there is no external loan that we can source as a result of unsustainable debt. So the government do a monetary repression and single knowledge or forced borrowing in general, and printing money to finance local projects. These mega projects that we see, that shines at Addis Ababa and others, or that all these locally financed projects increases inflation. We know that. Just money supply, definitely, if it's not controlled, it triggers inflation if we don't have enough production in the economy as well. So I think that's important. We want our government to be conservative, and then when they do the macro stabilization and also do whatever policy interventions or changes, we want them to create always something, a social buffer, thinking about, okay, if I do this, how many poors will going to be affected? How can I protect them? So it is very important for the government's priority to be like, okay, protecting the poor. Yes, we want to grow fast. We want to, see a lot of amazing things, but it shouldn't be at the cost of today's generation livelihood and poverty. And then it will be difficult even to get what we are envisioning in the long term if we don't really work on the short term as well. So, as I mentioned earlier, it's very important that the government to focus on macro stabilization, and as I said earlier as well, index-based NP transfers, rule-based grain reserve as well. And Ethiopia has a huge potential for arable land and irrigation. So I think it is very important whenever it's possible, the government to invest on small scale irrigation, not on the grand ones. The grand ones will help somehow, but the smaller scale irrigations are the one that will lift the majority of the rural poor out of poverty. And of course, we should still keep working on infrastructure that is key for market linkage and others. Thank you so much, Jalani.
Okay, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you very much, Dr. Reta and Dereje, for sharing thoughtful insight with us today. So your perspective have helped us see how development policy and resilience are not just technical matters, but lived reality for communities across Ethiopia. So given say that, I like to give chance for the audience since we are out of time. I'll take 3 questions. One is okay.
We already have questions on the chat message. A question from Dr. Nabiyu.
Okay, Dr. Adis, Dr. Hussein, and I think me is also. So should I read for you guys or?
Yeah, please do that. Yeah.
Okay. Dr. Nabiyu question is, do we currently have development policies that government is actively following to? And can you both reflect on this? Please go ahead.
Well, I can take this one, and then Doc will.
Okay, sure.
Okay. I mean, yes, we have. The 10-year perspective plan is our plan, our policy plan that the government is trying to follow. But I mean, what they call it, the homegrown economy plan. Sometimes, we don't want to say that in a blunt way. I don't know if that is really homegrown economy plan. That it is actually the perspective plan that drives the privatization of state enterprises, or at least the opening of state enterprises or sectors that has been closed to the public. I mean, the foreign investment into the telecom, the financial sector. These are part of our prospective plans. I mean, that comes from the 10-year perspective plan, and also that 10-year perspective plan as well also build on the climate green, the CRG, the climate resilient green economy, which was part of the GTP1 and GTP2 as well. So we can say this. Yes, we have a policy that we follow, but I believe they were not really poorly. They were communicating it poorly in a way that resembled to us, because I believe it is not such a proper one. So it might not be close to everyone of us, and then we weren't really fully exposed as it has been for GTP1, GTP2, or even the past DEP. So I guess we have the homegrown economy 10 years perspective plan, and accompanied by the nationally committed distribution one. in general. Back to you, Dr. Reta, if you have more to add on this.
I think I don't say much on this, but I think, yes, when we say about development policy, we're talking about the general framework. And at least this country do have, different sectors do have on the paper. Actually, that's led by the National Development Plan. So that's when we are talking about, development policy in this time, we're talking about the home growing, the 10 development perspective. Sometimes, if a cabinet came up with even a statement or with legislation, that would be part of development policy. It is general framework that guide and enabling development to take place. But understand this thing, practically the right away, the kind of development framework we have, or the kind of economy we have is actually a growth without development. I mean that's it's not translating to the growth, whether small or big, into development because of growing inequality, various dimensional fragility, and of course the challenge of sustainability. It's doubtful that even we could achieve sustainable development goal in 2013, but we have. It is there is on the paper. That's what we have historically, by the way. We have a good development policy. As I've said earlier, was bad implementation. Yeah, that's failure. And the challenge is still, the current policy, try to document what was the weakness of the previous policies or plans. There is in the policies, but in terms of, robust and holistic framework for building a more resilient, more prosperous, more equitable, and a good living standard in Ethiopia is actually unthinkable in 2030. According to the plan set, according to from this angle, to achieve this aspect is in 2013, but I don't. Yeah, this is what I want to add, Jalani. Thank you.
Okay, let's proceed with Dr. Adisu and Dr. Hussein questions. Let me summarize the question. With Ethiopia opening sector like telecom, banking, and logistics, how can the country balance attracting foreign investment, protecting national sovereignty, and ensuring that liberalization benefits ordinary citizens rather than just elite or foreign corporation? The second is, despite the Green Legacy Initiative, climate change still threatens livelihoods. What systematic change in water management and renewable energy, climate smart agriculture, and urban planning need to make Ethiopia a model for green and resilient development? Please proceed, Dr. Reta.
Yeah, thank you very much. Let me react to the first question. The issue of opening up the economy, national economy to the global economy at the current state means, for me, that's my opinion, it is a kind of national vulnerability. Given the level of debt, given the level of macroeconomic instability, in my opinion, I'm not against liberalization, but we said we are talking about homegrown economy. If I ordered a pizza and eat pizza at my home, but pizza is cooked outside, because just I eat it at my home, I can't say that it's homegrown, home cooked. You see, as far as the international financial architects are dictating you, or the powerful countries are dictating you how to do, what to do, when to do, we're nationally vulnerable. That's what I'm feeling as a person, also as a now student of development. So yeah, that's what I'm thinking. That's what makes the current homegrown economy, in my opinion, it is a kind of hallucination in this thinking. Is this really homegrown? That's actually another. It needs another seminar to discuss, and that's my opinion. Shall I proceed to the second question, or I may pass to Dereje?
Please proceed to the second question, Dr. Reta.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Hussein, for the question. I think, yeah, there is a long-term compromises when we are now actually implementing the short-term or achieving the short-term growth. It's not development. Growth does not mean development unless properly managed and handled. It will not be translated to development. For example, in agriculture, this time there is increasing, crop yield, marketable surplus, and the like. That's mainly to boost, farmers' income. But if you are not investing on the long-term building the capacity of the farmers to climate shocks, such as intensive watershed management, sustainable agriculture, conservation agriculture, climate smart agriculture, diversifying the livelihood of smallholder farmers, and even the need to even strengthening land tenure system. This motivate farmers to invest on their land, on soil fertilities, on planting trees and the like. This one that drive development. It's not the short term, just increasing productivity and coming up with actually unstatistical statistics. It's not statistically completed, but it's reported as statistics. So this is actually misleading. The same is true in trade and industrialization, by the way. We are now rushing just to generate foreign exchange, selling whatever national asset we have. But that even exacerbates vulnerability. Rather, we have to build diversified, economy, resilient economy, which can compete with, globally in terms of commodity price and withstand also the shock that emerged from the international market. For example, we can add value to coffees in terms of roasting, washing, packaging, branding, and the like, rather than selling just coffee bean. Same is true to diversifying export options or baskets, like investing, mainly in other sectors, including horticulture, working on tourism after actually working on establishing a peaceful and secure country, tech service and the like, and opening up also for the tech, companies is also very important. And the other thing is that we need to deepen, regional trade opportunities, like integrating Ethiopia with, for example, East African economic communities, African continental free trade agreements. This is providing marketing option. The other thing is still we need to scale up in terms of productive safety net program. In terms of working stringently on building terraces, conservation practices, smaller agricultural irrigations, and supporting this small scale irrigation to increase productions. And we should not focus simply in the urban areas. And I think in a couple of decades, just one decade, the rural road density is almost as it is. There's no investment in rural road, just to cite an example. So, yeah, I agree with you. We need to, strongly working in integrated manner than simply focusing on the, urban-centric issues. We have to make sure above and beyond to ensure sustainability and equity of development activities. That's what I want to say. If I missed any, please Dereje add it, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Reta. Actually, it's difficult to add on what you have mentioned. You have raised the key points. I think to sum up in general, I mean, we can conclude somehow. I know conclude is a difficult word or to use in such scenarios. The development policies that we are, the development practices or the interventions that we are seeing right now are not proper. Even the urban ones are not proper. I think that's the reality. So the country is vulnerable because the economy is not producing much. What we are doing is now selling what we have produced in the past or what we have built in the past. We are selling our hard-earned money for short-term gains like that. So I think be it the privatization, the invitation of the different international sectors to join the local market, we are bringing or inviting individuals who wants to make profit or investors who wants to make profit, whose responsibility is just making profit, not making Ethiopia wealthy or the Ethiopian rural poor getting food at their table. That's not their priority. So I think it is very important that whatever the government is doing, let's say in Ethiopia, we are not producing fuel. We are importing fuel. We are dependent on it. We definitely understand the government's push towards to rural, towards to electrification or electric cars and everything is very good. It will save a huge amount of dollars. But a development policy that is proper won't be or won't dare to take off the subsidies on fuel, given the fact that a 10 cents change on fuel will have a multiplier impact on the price of the products in general. It affects transport, it affects manufacturers, and everybody in the value chain. And then we ended up paying the price. So I think it is very important for the government to really revise the policies that are enacted, even so far. Are they pro-poor? How are really they helping the majority of the poor in general? This question has to be answered. If they don't have a good answer for this, definitely in the long run we will be less resilient, and then national interest sovereignty will be also questioned. If you don't have the right infrastructure to fight back, I don't think that you can be sovereign enough. So, of course, we are showing, significant improvement in generating power or electricity. That's a good achievement. But now we are increasing electric usage threefold or fourfold. How come the rural farmers afford that unless we actually move to other cheapest options of renewable energy like solar? So I guess we certainly know that it is the global development donors' guidance that, okay, remove the subsidies, change your rates, on fuel, electricity. These are important things. Again, like fuel, if you increase the rate per kilowatt for a manufacturing industry, they will trickle down that price change to us. Not, they won't eat the change. They will pass the increment to us. Eventually, it is us, the poor, who will be affected by that. So I guess it is for the government to sit back again and reflect, and then do some actions towards it. Back to you, Jack.
Okay, thank you so much, Jerry. Please take the question and let's wrap up today's session, please. Jerry, go ahead, please.
Thank you very much for organizing this event. I think it's very. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, sure.
Okay, thank you for organizing this event. I think it's very interesting topic, and naturally the topic is debatable, and no wonder we may have some differences in our thoughts. And I had a lot of questions, but for the interest of time, I'm dropping most of them, and I'm just asking one question. You said we have some development policies. At least, I mean, we heard about them, and be that as it may, my question is, do you think these policies are owned by, meaning accepted by the general public? And if they are, how do you think that acceptance would help to achieve the targets? And if not, what do you think will be the consequence? And building on that, do you think the government that does some projects, that execute some projects, irrespective of what society needs, like some benevolent dictators in the literature, will be recommended at this stage, or the fact that if there is a divergence between what the society is needing and what is undertaking, do you think that is one signal for the policy to become less effective? So I just want to hear your opinion on the public ownership, the societal ownership of these policies. Thank you.
I mean, the answer is, do the society owns it? I would say no. Before that, though, I want to explain one thing. In the past 30 years of the PRDF as well, whether for example, when the first poverty strategy paper was released, there wasn't much discussion. And then when the past day as well, it was pretty much a desktop work. Of course, during the GTP1, there has been some discussion as well, somehow around. They do the discussion across different worlds. So in general, even though the development policies or the plans or the frameworks were not publicly discussed, or the input were asked from the public in drafting the frameworks, after they enact it, after the frameworks are released, they make sure the public is aware about it, and the public in one way or another owns it because it affects my life. I own that development policy because I'm smallholder agriculture, living and then I'm getting extension service, I'm getting market connectivity through road construction. So I own that policy. One of the 40,000 health extension workers or the 17,000 health posts that were built during that time, she came to my office and then my home, and she taught me about nutrition, wash, sanitation, and hygiene. I lived that. So, which means I owned it, because the nature of those policies are the way they've been crafted is just, their pillars in general is emanated from attaining sustainable development goals and the Millennium Development Goals. So if you see, they are proper in their nature. I'm not saying they are perfect, evenly implemented. There was injustice, unfair things. No, I'm not idolizing that. But in terms of ownership, at least on paper, we owned it somehow. We may disagree on some of the policies, even the elite group, some of the policies, but we own, at least we heard in detail, or we see some of the implementation. So here, when it comes to the 10-year perspective plan, of course, the government did a glamorous public relation in beautiful halls and announce it. But do the public media communicate that perspective plan? Do EVCs, FANAs, do they really try to assert that perspective plan into the minds of the community? I doubt. Of course, this might need further investigation and research. And does it trickle down to me? I'm afraid. An urban elite, if an urban elite questions the perspective plan, I would question it that we owned it. Of course, in publicly communicating it, COVID was there, and the conflict, the 2020 conflict there. I mean, still we're in conflict, so they might argue that they didn't get that dissemination into the local level because of the current precarious situations. But I don't think the society owns it, and for that matter, knows about it very well. Well, back to you.
Jalani, maybe before closing, can you give me a minute to reflect on this?
Okay, sure.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think the issue of ownership of policy depends on how policy making process was done. If the policy making processes are actually bottom up, everyone reflects on their needs, priorities and the like. Yeah, at least at the regional level, world level, there may be some policy discussions for policy issues. Issues will now actually collected and finally aggregated to the policy level. If that issue needs actually a policy solution. If it is a top-down, we cannot talk about ownership. It's the top-down. It's made or crafted by the states, actually to keep moving the region. Bear in mind, we have to separate regime as well as states, because historically the state and regime have been interchangeably used, and also they have used for the tenure of the regime or the states, not actually change the life of people. I'm mindful of that, and that's actually the sad aspect of these policies, the entire historical these policies, and the current policies. The amazing thing is that this policy, I've heard through media something like that. It was really very painstaking to make the policy clear to the people, and that makes very difficult. After the policy, we expect some strategies. If you change the policy, you have to strategize how you implement that policy. That strategy will be translated to program into project, and blah, blah, and then trickle down into the communities. So, yeah, I'm confidently say that the current policy is not owned by the community at large. It's owned by the state and the regime. This is my conclusion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Reta and Dereje. And thank you to everyone who shared and to all of you who joined engaged in today's conversation. And what we have heard remind us that resilience is not just about surviving challenges, it's about transforming them into opportunities for stronger and more inclusive development. With that, I officially close today's seminar. Thank you once again. I look forward to seeing you for next seminar. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you so much, Dereje, for moderating this session. Again, it's an honor, Dr. Reta, being a panelist alongside with you. It's an honor. Thank you.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Also, thank you, Dereje, for having me. Have a good time. Bye.
Okay, bye.